ever met somebody who changed how you wanted to live? Like there was just something about them. I remember years ago we had Bob Goff come speak at the church, and it was just this experience of meeting somebody who in my opinion was like unbelievable. Like it really was like fascinating to me to meet somebody that lived that way, where they were just complete reckless abandonment in their faith, and everything they did was about love. And he was just an amazing person. And so I've heard him speak several times, and I've had the opportunity to meet him a couple times. And every single time I walk away from that going, man, I want to be like that person. I want to be like who he is. I don't know if you've ever met someone that changed maybe how you lived or how you thought or how you were going through life. When I was a kid, we used to go to family camp. Has anybody ever gone to family camp with your church? They're extinct now. They don't do those anymore. But we used to take all the churches from our denomination. I lived up in the Northwest, and all these churches would come together, and adults would do their thing, kids would do their thing, students, and then we'd come together every night. We'd all eat meals together. And it was this week experience that I don't remember anything about, to be honest with you. But when I was a fourth grader, maybe a fifth grader, I met this kid. And I don't know his name or much about him. I know that he could do back handsprings and backflips. And so everybody saw him do these back handsprings and backflips, and every kid went, that guy's cool. And then you got to meet him, and I realized this guy's kind. And then you saw him interact with other kids, and you see this guy's loving. And then he talked to parents, and I was like, this guy's respectful. And then I remember thinking, this guy might be Jesus. I need to stay close to him. But that entire week, I hung out with this kid. And I remember leaving there going, I want to be like him. It's funny because I've thought about him for years. 40 years later, I still remember exactly what he looked like. I went home and I tried to do back handsprings. I nailed that. The backflips, that was a little more painful. But I held on to who he was for years. And it's interesting because I don't know his name. I don't know where he's from. I don't know what he did with his life. I don't know if he's still alive. I don't know a single thing about who he was or who he became. But that week, our lives collided and he changed how I wanted to live. You know, there's this art of becoming human, of being alive. And we're going to be looking at what does it mean to be a person of influence. All of us are people of influence. What does it mean to have our stories shared with others, to have them change people? What does it mean to go through life at work and in your relations? How do we become people? That statement, becoming human. You see, because I do really honestly believe that there is a process, especially for men, of becoming human. More specifically, teenage boys. You know, you look at a kid sometimes and you go, they're not fully developed. Like there's something wrong. Now I know this because everyone said that about me, and I'd watch them tell my parents, your kid okay? Yeah, why? I don't know, it just seems a little off. I watched this video years ago and I showed it to my wife, and it's two boys arguing. And then the one boy, watch, the two guys are arguing, and then the one kid just says, oh yeah, I can do this, watch. Boom. Now the question is, why did he do that? What are they arguing about? What's he thinking? Complete boom. My wife saw that, she's like, that's the dumbest thing I've ever seen. I'm like, no, that's the greatest. She goes, what do you mean? She goes, who would do that? And I'm like, well, I kind of did stuff like that. She goes, no, nobody does that. And I think that we could go around the room and specifically talk to the men, and we could say, do you remember a moment in your life where you did something like that? And there's just gonna be the slow, yep. And the wives are looking at it going, yesterday. So something happens as we grow, as we begin to find our passions, our identity, who we are as a human. But there's also this purity. If you step way back and you look at children, there's this purity and this honesty of love and hope and respect. I read a book a while back called Everything I Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten. Be kind. Don't hit. Share your cookies. Take naps. Period. And you watch a child interact and be loving and to be caring. And it's also a beautiful thing when you hear a child talk about Jesus, and it's like they get the basic principles of what it means to follow Jesus. And I think that's, for me, why Bob Goff was so attractive, because he found out what it meant just to be human, to be passionate about following Jesus. You look in the scriptures and you see Jesus is constantly calling the kids to him. It says in Matthew chapter 19, verse 13 through 14, it says, "Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them. But the disciples rebuked them." The old people, the adults in the room, the leaders. "Keep the kids away. What's wrong with you? This is Jesus." Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder me. For the kingdom of heaven belongs to such as these." That statement where he says, "Let the children come to me," is powerful, because then it follows up with the kingdom of heaven is going to look just like this. You use that phrase, "come to me." I believe it's not just for the children, but it's for all of us. And as we grow, we have a tendency to lose sight on what that really means. We grow up and we begin to think, is this for me? But in reality, that statement, "come to me," is for every single person in this room. Regardless of your wealth, your status, your success, your experiences, the basic truth of that "come to me" statement can radically change who you are as a human if you buy into it. Like I said, though, as we grow, we have a tendency to walk in a different direction and to begin to turn and look at other things to become important. And we find our value in things like wealth, success, work. Social media tells us who we should be and what we should be. There's some of you teenagers in here right now are down looking at your phone, and I can see you. But you don't, oh, they put it away. Not all of them. It's okay, though. You see, we find value in what this says. And I was in Sholo last week. I was in a store. I was standing there and I was thinking about people. And I was thinking about, what do we as people say is important? Like, what are the things that we value? What are the things that we run to or turn to? And I'm standing in the supermarket and I look to my right in the bank magazines and People magazine. And I'm thinking, if I want to know what's important according to the world, then I've got to get People magazine. So I'm standing there in line and I'm looking at it and I'm trying to go through it as quickly as I can so I don't have to buy it. And then I get to the checkout lady and she kind of looks at me and I'm holding People like this, and I kind of realize, no, I need this. And so I put it down, upside down, and she picks it up and turns it over, and she sees the pink People with Nick Jonas and some lady who he married on the cover. And she looked at me, and then she looked back down, and then she kind of just shrugged her shoulders and charged me $5.99. And so I took it home, and I sat on the couch, and I started going through this, and I was looking at what is it that People says is important. And there's like 6 pages on Nick Jonas's wedding. I didn't read all of it, a few pages. And it talks about who is important, the most intriguing people, the movies that we have to see, the people. There's a whole section on celebrities that are still married. Like, shocking. Like, this is amazing. The people that had babies, there's the top pets that you need to have, the viral moments. There's all these different, the fads, the key fads. These are the things that are important. The floss was important this year. Tiny sunglasses. It says that pickle juice from Sonic was important. Anyone pickle juice from Sonic? You may all stay. And then it says there's this big picture of a scruffalove. Among the season's most wanted toys are these mystery rescue pets that start out as mashed fur balls, but after a child bathes them, dries them, and grooms them, it magically turns into an adorable kitten, puppy, or bunny. Now here's the secret. Some guy bought a whole huge shipment of these. I guarantee you the semi opened up and they all went all over the road and were all matted and filthy and dirty. And he's like, what am I gonna do? I lost my entire investment. I know. I'll take these stinky little nasty things, I'll put them in a nice box, I'll charge $200, and kids are gonna tell their parents, I have to have this. Genius. And these are the things that we look through, obviously in jest, but these are the things, honestly, oftentimes we look through this and we think, I want to become just like that person. I want to have that wet marriage. I want to have that wealth. I want to have that success. And we look through these things and we begin to tell ourselves, if I have these things, then I will become important, or I will become fully human. If I step back and I look at scriptures and I go to the very beginning of what does it mean to be a human, to be a person. In Genesis chapter 1, it simply says this: God created humans, people, in his image. That's a statement for all of us that says you are of value. You are a beautiful, created human being. We don't tell ourselves that often enough. If I'm going to be fully human in this world, then I have to buy into who I am first. Secondly, it says in Genesis chapter 2, it said it is not good that man should be alone, that people should go through life by themselves. It's a bigger statement. If I'm made in his image, when life gets difficult or hard, we have a tendency to kind of collapse back into this space and keep it to ourselves. But from the basic precepts of what it means to be human, it means that I have to go through life with a group of people that love me. It then says in Genesis chapter 15, 21, 26, throughout Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Joshua, all throughout scriptures, it says simply, do not be afraid. It's one of the most spoken things in scripture. Do not be afraid. And yet I can't buy into the fact sometimes that I'm made in his image. And I feel like I just need to be by myself. And I'm scared out of my mind. And Jesus says simply, I need you to follow me. Come to me. See, there's power in that statement. There's power in understanding who we are as humans. And I know all these things. As a pastor, I endorse all these things. I buy into all these things, but as a human, I struggle in my insecurities and my doubts. And sometimes when I hear that statement come to me and when I try to figure out what it means, I kind of step back and I go, yeah, but I don't know if I'm good enough. This last week, for example, I was studying for this. I was studying people. So I started listening to every podcast I could. I was watching all kinds of TED Talks. I read Bob Goff's book, Everybody Always, Becoming Love in a World Full of Setbacks and Difficult People. I read John Ortberg's book, I'd Like You More If You Were More Like Me. Getting real about getting close. I went through Donald Miller's book called Scary Close, Dropping the Act and Finding True Intimacy. It's about learning how to love who you are as a person. And I really was fascinated, all just brilliant books. And I sat down on Wednesday, I was talking with my wife and she asked me, what are you speaking on? And I said, well, Donald Miller has these really phenomenal points on this. And then Bob Goff said this about being human. And John Ortberg was talking about how we need to do these things and get rid of these things. And I saw this podcast and I was listening to Brené Brown. And so she stopped me, she said, but what are you speaking on? I said, well, I'd like to speak what they wrote about because that's pretty genius and it'd make my job easy. And she said, but what are you speaking on? And I realized in that moment, I didn't know. And it was like I went back to high school and all my insecurities as a student and as a kid that's trying to learn kind of started to creep up and I could feel it within me welling up, this idea of, I don't know. So I got up from the table, put my plate in the sink, walked to the back room, closed the door, and I just stood there and I just went, God, I don't know if I can do this. And honestly, as a human, if I'm being honest with you, I broke down. It felt like my chest was caving in, and I just remember sitting there thinking, God, I don't know if I can do this. I don't want to do this. Let me go back to building houses. That's a whole lot easier. And it was just silence. And so I sat down at my desk, I opened up my computer, and I literally Googled, God can use you in spite of your weakness. Nothing to do with my sermon. I just needed to hear someone say something about how I could be alive and be a human in spite of who I am, my weakness, my failures. And I clicked on the first article. I didn't read any of it. I just scrolled down till I could find a verse in parentheses. I just wanted to see what the Bible said about this. So I clicked on it. It was 1 Corinthians chapter 1, 26 through 31. It was in the Message translation, and I just started reading. And you know how sometimes when scripture just speaks to you? It said, take a look, friends, at who you were when God called you into this life I don't see many of the brightest and the best among you, not many influential, not many from high society families. Isn't it obvious that God deliberately chose men and women that the culture overlooks and exploits and abuses? He chose these nobodies to expose the hollow pretensions of the somebodies. That makes it quite clear that none of you can get by blowing your own horn before God. Everything that we have, right thinking and right living, a clean slate and a fresh start comes from God by way of Jesus Christ. That's why we have the saying, if you're going to blow a horn, blow a trumpet for God. I read that 5 or 6 times. And that line where it says, the nobodies. He chose the nobodies to expose the hollow pretensions of the somebodies. The nobodies, the not smart enoughs, the not good enoughs, the not cool enough, the weak, the old, the young. Jesus says, follow me, come to me. And I just stood there and just broke down and realized the power of not who I am as a human, but the power of what God can do through me. If I step in, Matthew 11:28-30 says, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. I picture Jesus sitting there speaking. His disciples and his followers and the children are all around him. But there's people on the outside that are just kind of watching. There's also the Pharisees and the religious leaders, and they're listening to him, and he just simply quietly says, come to me, all of you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. You see, that was complete opposite of what the Pharisees were speaking on. It's what opposite of what the teachers were speaking on. See, they were talking about their traditions and the rules, and if you wanted to get close to God, then you had to follow all of these commandments and do all of these things. These outward appearance things that were required for you to do, and yet Jesus said, come to me. You see, look at who we are today, and it's very focused. We're very focused as humans on our outward actions, on what we say, what we do, where we go, how we appear to be healthy. And we do all of these things just so that we can be better people. And yet Jesus says, come to me. Like, as you are, the real you, the nobodies, come to me. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. And he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. Take my yoke. Wherever you are in life, if you're tired, if you're stressed, if you're burned out, if you're just done, if you just feel like you don't have what it takes to keep moving forward, if you can't take another step, take my yoke. You see, take my yoke. Yoke actually meant be my disciple. Disciple meant follow me. So Jesus is saying, listen, I know exactly where you're at. Take my yoke, become my disciple, and follow me. And like I said, sometimes scripture just needs to speak. And so I look at that verse, Matthew 11:28-30, and I pulled it up in the Message version because Eugene Peterson has a way to write sometimes where it really just speaks deep into your soul. And so listen to this. Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. It's such a powerful statement. And again, listen to it as if it's being spoken to you. Are you tired? Yeah. Are you worn out? Yeah. Are you burned out on religion? Sometimes. Come to me. Get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. You know, for me, I look at that statement and I have to be honest. Who wouldn't want to step into something like that? I don't care where you come from, what your background is. Who wouldn't want this version of Jesus, this version of love, this beautiful image of how we can come before him? And I think about who my friends are and my circle is and the people that are keeping me alive, that are walking through life with me. And one of the things I realized as I was processing through this, Jesus said, take my yoke, but he also said, take this story with you out into the world. And what we have a tendency to do is to walk through life with a group of people that look just like us, act just like us, believe in the same things that we believe in. And before we know it, as we're walking, our circle looks exactly like us. I think about who Jesus sat down with and the places that he went and the prostitutes that he called out and the broken people and the criminals and the people that looked completely different from him. And he said, come to me. You know, for me, one of the things that I see when Jesus says, come to me and take my yoke, one of the things I've seen recently here at the Grove is over the last several months, you've heard how we've had these families, these immigrant families coming in to the Grove, and many of you, hundreds of you, have taken them home for a day or two or three. And it was this moment of different cultures and different places colliding. And most often, you couldn't speak to each other, and you just kind of figured it out, and they were only with you for 1 to 3 days. But every single person I've talked to has said, you know what, that was one of the greatest things I've ever done in my life. That radically transformed how I view other humans and other people and how we're called to live. When Jesus says, come to me, take my yoke, sometimes we get blessed to do that with other people. This next Tuesday, we have 50 families coming to the Grove again. I would encourage you, if you've been sitting on the sidelines wondering if this is something I could ever do or be a part of, or does my faith feel too comfortable and safe, I'd encourage you to step into that. And come and join us Tuesday, 11 or 12 o'clock, and just see how somebody who's completely outside of your circle can change who you are. You know, I've been praying about that as well for myself. I've been praying about my future. Not job-wise, but just life-wise, how I'm going through life, who I'm going through life with, how I'm mentoring those around me, how I'm teaching, how I'm speaking, how I'm living. I've been praying, God, take me to these places of uncomfortableness. And one of the things I love doing is when we serve downtown Chandler with Live Love, how you're in a group of a community of people that's 4 miles away but are radically different than me. And we had our Christmas party in December. We had all the people, 100 or so people from Live Love that we've been working with, and they're all sitting around these tables, and a lot of you who've been volunteering were there. And Ruth, who's the key lady down there, she knows every cop, every gang member, every criminal, every teacher. She knows every single person in her area. And she came up to me and she said, Paul, I want to introduce you to Crazy Larry. I said, you want to introduce me to Crazy Larry? She said, yeah, Crazy Larry's here. You need to meet him. Okay, now I don't know what you have as a picture of Crazy Larry in your head, but I had a picture definitely of what Crazy Larry was like. And so I started walking towards this table. In the back, there was these two guys who said, Paul, this is Crazy Larry and Chewy. I said, sup, Crazy Larry and Chewy? And Crazy Larry looks at me, and you know when you can look at somebody and you kind of give him a head nod? He just looked at me and gave me it wasn't even a movement. It was more of his eyes twitched just a teeny bit. And that's all the, hey, that I was getting from him. And so Ruth is standing there, I'm standing there, Crazy Larry and Chewy are here. And Ruth goes, Crazy Larry wants to be a rapper. And this kid, I'm telling you, was covered completely in tattoos. He's maybe 22 years old. He's all by himself. And I've heard stories about him. And one of the things that's been moving in my soul is this whole group of young men downtown that don't have fathers, that don't have people going through life with them, and they've completely lost their dreams. And so when I heard her say he wants to be a rapper, it tells me at least he's still dreaming. I said, you want to be a rapper? He goes, that's right. And then Ruth goes, Paul used to be a rapper. And I was like, no, stop. And she goes, yeah, Paul did shows in Watts and Compton and East LA. And he looked at me with this look of confusion like, I don't think so. and I knew I had to grasp the moment. So I kind of stepped forward and I said, You don't think I can rap? He goes, no. I said, look, how about we go old school? How about you stand up and we have a rap battle right now? Let's throw down, let's see what happens. Now, inside my head, I was going, no. Don't stand up, stay seated. I have nothing left in the tank. And I just thought, let's go for it. I said, let's go, stand up. You afraid? You afraid to battle an old man? Now, for some of you are a little confused what a rap battle is. Old school, just Google that, old school rap battle, 1989, you'll understand it, change your life. And I was petrified that he was gonna stand up. And he kind of started laughing, he goes, nah, I'm not gonna stand up. I said, that's a good choice. And then I almost passed out. And Crazy Larry and Chewy, well, Chewy apparently never speaks, but Crazy Larry and I talked for a while, talked about his dreams, talked about life. And I told him, I said, all right, someday we're gonna do this. We're gonna rap together. And he goes, aight. I walked away and Ruth was like, thanks. Thank you for talking to Crazy Larry and Chewy. And then Ruth's son, Danky, D-A-N-K-Y, was standing there. And I walked up to Danky. He has got a big old tattoo on his left eye. I said, Danky, how you doing? He goes, I'm all right. He said, I'm going to jail tomorrow, but it's cool. I was like, what? He goes, yeah, it's just 6 months, it'll be fine. I'm like, I'm sorry. He goes, you know what? Sometimes you make bad decisions and you gotta pay for them. And I said, sometimes you can grow from those decisions. He says, yeah, that's true. I said, Danky, what do you want to do with your life? He goes, I don't know. I'm like, do you like working with your hands? He goes, like washing dishes? I'm like, no, like building stuff. He goes, what would you build? I said, what about a tiny house? How about you and I build a tiny house when you get out? He said, what's a tiny house? I said, well, it's a house, but it's tiny. And he said, is that what all you rich people, where you build these things and you put in your backyard? Is that what you're talking about? And I said, well, yeah, I guess so. He goes, that'd be tight. That'd be tight. I said, how about you and I build a tiny house when you get out? Okay. And then I said to Danky, I said, Danky, you know who I am. You know what I'm about. I want to know if it's okay, and I'm going to do it anyway. I want you to know I'm going to pray for you every single day when you're in jail. For the next 6 months, I'm going to pray for you. Is that okay? He goes, that'd be tight. That'd be tight. You see, there's this thing when we become uncomfortable in this calling when Jesus says, come to me. When he says, take my yoke. When he says, follow me. The reason that people followed Jesus is because he was authentic. Everywhere he went, with everyone he talked to, there was this period when people would sit down with him and know this guy is speaking truth and hope and love. And what does it mean to be human? For me, it means that I have to figure out, in spite of my weaknesses and the fact that I feel like a nobody, that when he's nudging me and saying, come to me, I'm stepping into those moments. When I'm tired or exhausted or feel like I'm not good enough, I have to know that when he says, take my yoke, that he's walking with me. And I have to figure out how to go through life where I'm bringing this story of Jesus, where I have to be authentic in who I am, that the people that come around me say, I want what this guy has. Are you tired? Are you worn out? Are you burned out on religion? Come to me. Get away with me. And you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me, and you'll learn to live freely and lightly. Such a beautiful teaching that I honestly believe every single one of us can step into. Live this way. I promise it'll change your life.